Okay, let's dive into this. Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're exploring a fascinating and, frankly, kind of mind-bending shift in human history. We're looking at how modern digital platforms have taken something as uniquely human as our personality and literally turned it into a measurable, tradable digital currency. I mean, we're living in an era where our approval is quantified instantly through screens, and it is actively shaping our identity, our confidence, and our emotional resilience. To make sense of all this, we're going on a bit of a peeling the onion journey today. We'll start with the personality market, move into performing the front stage, and then look at the cyber self. After that, we'll hit Jungian masks and shadows, the algorithmic attention economy, and finally, wrap up with reclaiming authentic value.
All right, Section 1, the personality market.
Now, what's really interesting about this is the number 0, because 0 is the exact amount of your innate human worth that is determined by your follower counts, likes, or really any digital metrics. We live in a society where personal traits have become this heavily branded commodity for social status, right? A teenager can become globally famous overnight, and a random influencer can have more reach than Shakespeare. Yet, despite this overwhelming pressure to equate our value with our visibility, the fundamental truth remains: your inherent worth is completely independent of those numbers.
Moving on to Section 2, performing the front stage.
So, if our true worth isn't tied to these metrics, why are we all working so hard to maintain them? Well, to understand this, we have to look at the work of sociologist Erving Goffman. Back in 1959, Goffman introduced his dramaturgical theory. He proposed that all social interactions are essentially a theatrical performance. Basically, we all put on different masks and play different roles depending on our audience, carefully managing impressions to meet societal expectations. And while Goffman was originally talking about physical, face-to-face encounters, social media has effectively become the ultimate global news stage for constructing an idealized image of ourselves. Goffman split this performance into two arenas. On one side, you have what we can think of as the shiny, metallic gold front stage. This is your curated, edited digital life. It's the flawless vacation photos, the fitness milestones, the perfectly plated dinners. But on the other side, in the deep sapphire blue, is the backstage. This is our authentic hidden life. It's where the unexposed vulnerabilities, the messy rooms, and the genuine unedited realities actually exist. Online, the boundary between these two stages is constantly blurring, but the pressure to keep that front stage flawless, it is absolutely immense.
To see the real-world impact of this, let's talk about Lena. She's a 28-year-old entrepreneur who built a really strong following around her creative work. But over time, she started feeling this intense pressure to present a consistently successful image, even when she was totally stressed out or struggling. So she started tailoring her work solely to what she knew would get likes and ended up abandoning the projects she actually cared about. This constant performance created a deeply exhausting disconnect between her internal experience and her external image, which eventually led to severe emotional burnout and anxiety. She was essentially living entirely on the front stage.
Which brings us to Section 3, the cyber self.
Moving a little deeper into the onion, let's explore what living on that front stage actually does to our sense of self. Sociologists often bring up Cooley's concept of the looking glass self, which is the idea that we form our identity based on how we think others perceive us. Well, in the digital age, this has evolved into the cyber self. Online, that looking glass isn't imaginary anymore. It is incredibly concrete. Every single like, comment, and share acts as a literal, visible social mirror. As we constantly refine our presentation to get validation, these metrics actively reinforce or shatter our self-worth in real time.
And you know what? This validation process fundamentally alters our brain chemistry. Let's walk through the dopamine cycle. Step 1, you post content. Step 2, you receive an unpredictable notification. That unpredictability is the key here. It's exactly like pulling the lever on a slot machine. And let's be honest, we're all guilty of pulling that lever from time to time, constantly checking our phones hoping for a hit. Step 3, your brain releases dopamine, which is the neurotransmitter linked to pleasure and reward. And finally, Step 4, this creates a habitual checking behavior. These intermittent digital rewards completely hijack the brain's reward pathways, so when engagement drops, it triggers very real feelings of rejection, creating these massive mood fluctuations that can completely destabilize your nervous system. So I want you to pause and really think about this for a second. Are your likes reflecting who you are or who you want them to see? Because as we curate our digital lives to feed that dopamine cycle, the gap between our true identity and the one we're performing for digital validation just grows wider and wider. All right, Section 4, Jungian masks and shadows.
And this brilliantly illustrates a much deeper psychological layer. Carl Jung's psychoanalytic theories map so perfectly onto our modern digital habits. Jung spoke a lot about the persona, the stylized social mask that we present to the world. Online, this mask becomes heavily fragmented because we're constantly tailoring it for different platforms and different audiences. But Jung also warned of the shadow, the unconscious repository of our repressed desires, our insecurities, and our unacceptable impulses. And here's the catch. The harder we work to maintain a perfect persona online, the more that shadow seeks a release. In digital spaces, this repressed shadow often leaks out in the form of moral outrage, cancel culture, public shaming, and just raw, anonymous hostility.
It's fascinating because researchers are even drawing parallels between today's digital narcissism, particularly on visually driven apps like TikTok, and classic literature. Take Dostoevsky's Underground Man. He's a character totally tortured by his contradictory self-image. As the analysis goes, he oscillates between perceiving himself as a brilliant hero in the mud and a loathsome insect. Today, users are privately suffering immense existential anxiety, bouncing rapidly between the grandiosity of viral success and the deep self-abasement of being ignored by the algorithm. They are wearing a digital mask that acts as a prison.
Let's pivot to Section 5, the algorithmic attention economy. To really understand why this psychological pressure is so intense, we have to examine the platforms themselves. Recent sociological studies on youth identity formation reveal something quite disturbing. There is a strong negative correlation of -0.42 between the time spent on visual social platforms and self-esteem. Simply put, as screen time goes up, self-esteem definitively goes down. And why? Because these algorithmic feeds guarantee a constant upward peer comparison. You aren't just comparing yourself to your neighbors anymore. You're comparing yourself to the highly curated, digitally altered highlights of the entire world. These algorithms operate as a massive, systemic engine. They extract what scholar Shoshana Zuboff calls instrumentarian power, which means using our behavioral data to modify and direct human behavior for commercial gain. By rewarding highly self-focused content, the system normalizes narcissism and fosters deep echo chambers. It creates what philosopher Byung-Chul Han actually describes as a burnout society. This is a culture of exhaustive self-performance where genuine, messy human connection is ultimately replaced by mere representation. Essentially, the attention economy is commodifying our human vulnerability just to keep us scrolling.
Finally, Section 6, Reclaiming Authentic Value. Let's move to and see how this builds into something practical. How do we actually escape this? Well, we need to build a framework for real emotional resilience. First, try doing empathy push-ups. Instead of just passively liking a post, send a specific, personal text asking a friend how they are really doing behind the scenes. Second, audit your algorithms. Unfollow the accounts that thrive on outrage or make you feel envious, and actively curate feeds that normalize imperfection. Third, establish firm digital boundaries to limit that passive scrolling loop. And finally, engage in somatic self-care. Doing things like breathwork, gentle movement, or just literally being out in nature can physically regulate a nervous system that has been completely overstimulated by constant dopamine spikes. So the crucial point is understanding the fundamental difference between self-esteem and self-worth. Self-esteem is based purely on doing, succeeding, performing, getting those likes. Because of that, it's incredibly fragile. It fluctuates constantly with your successes and failures. Self-worth, however, is based simply on being. It is the unconditional, inherent value of your existence, completely independent of external digital feedback. Your self-esteem might be shattered by a bad post, but your self-worth? That is constant and unchanging.
We've peeled back a lot of layers of the personality market today, from the curated front stage all the way down to the algorithmic engines that prey on our psychological shadows. So I want to leave you with this final, provocative thought from clinical psychology. What if you really were of worth, deep down, without a single like, comment, or follower? Building that internal emotional resilience is absolutely the key to stepping off the digital stage and discovering your truly authentic identity beyond the screen. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer.